Okay, we're going to, excuse me, we're going to look at the rest of the answers for review for test 6. The problems we did not cover in class, so we'll start with number 1. Number 1 says use a trapezoidal sum with 3 subintervals to find the amount of oil in the tank at time t equals 15. Notice we start out at t equals 4, and it says we already have 50, so make sure we've got that 50. Don't forget about the 50. And then we're using a trapezoidal sum. The formula for trapezoid, area formula for trapezoid is 1/2 times the height times the bases added together. So I went ahead and pulled the 1/2 out. Then we're going to do height times the bases, the sum of the bases. So on the first one, 4 to 7 gives me 3. Add the bases together gives me 12.7. 7 to 12 gives me 5. Add the bases together gives me 12.1. 12 to 15 is 3. Add the bases together, I get 11.5. I work it all out. I get 116.55 liters. Using correct units, explain the meaning of this. So if I'm integrating, that means I need to multiply by units. So if I multiply these two, I'm only going to end up with liters. In this problem, what we're talking about with liters is oil. And it says oil is being pumped into the tank. So this means we're talking about the amount of oil in liters that was pumped into the tank or entered the tank between t equals 4 hours and 15 hours. Make sure you have the units here, and then make sure you have the units here. There's always going to be 2 sets of units. Make sure you always have the units in there. Find the area that's trapped. Area, again, we're just doing a definite integral to get that. So we go from -10 to 10, -10 to 10, 100 minus x squared dx. Then we integrate, make sure we plug the top in first, minus, plug in the bottom. We end up with 4,000 over 3. Pretty straightforward on that problem. Not much going on. The next one, I have the graph of f. So we want to know what this is. So we're looking at area under the curve between -3 and 4. So between -3 and 4 all the way to here. Notice that these 2 triangles right here cancel each other out. So when I figure this out, I'm only going to go to 2. So this 1/2 right here is the area of that triangle. This 4 right here is the area of the rectangle that's on the bottom of this. 1/2 pi times 4 is the area of the semicircle up here. I put all of that together. I get 4.5 plus 2 pi. So that's number 3. Number 4. 4 to 8, f plus g. So that's just a matter of adding 12 plus 5 and gives me 17. 2 times f, so 2 times f gives me 24. 3 times g gives me 15. Subtract the 2, I get 9. On this one, we're going from 4 to 4. We didn't go anywhere, so that means we're going to be equal to 0. On this one, we're backwards. Remember, if we have to switch these, then we change the sign. So 4 to 8 is 5, so that means 8 to 4 is -5. Then on this one, make sure we split it up. 4 to 8 of f is 12, so that's where the 12 comes from. And then whenever I just have a number like this, I take the difference, which is 4, times 5, which gives me 20. 12 plus 20 gives me 32. 5 and 6, we're just integrating an indefinite integral. 7 is also indefinite. Don't forget your plus c's on the indefinite. On this one, make sure you change it to w to the 1/3 before you integrate. So 1/3 plus 1 gives me 4/3. Multiply by the reciprocal. 1 turns into w, and then don't forget the plus c. Pi is nothing more than a number, and when I integrate a number, I just add the variable, so that gives me pi x. 11 plus 1 gives me 12. Turns into 1/12 in front. Integral of cosine is sine. The negative stays there, and then plus c. On 7, make sure you split 7 up. So this right here is actually x to the 3/2, and this is x to the 1/2. So when I have x to the 3/2 divided by x to the 1/2, I am subtracting the exponents. So 3/2 minus 1/2 gives me 1. So that's why this is just x to the first. Then I have 1 divided by x to the 1/2. So I just move the x to the 1/2 up. Gives me x to the -1/2. 1 plus 1 gives me 2. And I divide. 1/2 plus 1 gives me 1/2. Multiplied by the reciprocal. There's 2. Don't forget your plus c. I've got a definite integral here. Integrate gives me that. Integrate here. Make sure you plug the top in first. Minus the bottom. So I get x to the 4th minus 3x squared minus 1 minus 3, so we end up with x to the fourth minus 3x squared plus 2. Nothing fancy there. We did 9 in class. Number 10, set the inside equal to 0. When I set the inside equal to 0, I get 4. So that means I need a 0 to 4, and then I need a 4 to 6. Again, pick a number in between 0 and 4, so I'm going to pick 1. 4 minus 1 gives me a positive number, so that means I want 4 minus x here, and that means the opposite has to go here. Then it's just a matter of integrating and plugging in. Nothing fancy there. You should be able to handle the rest. We did 11 in class. 12. We want the distance traveled, so we're talking about velocity. If I integrate velocity, I get distance. So we're going from 0 to 3. Integrate from 0 to 3, 6t minus t squared dt. Integrate, nothing fancy there. Plug in the 3, plug in the 0. We end up with 18. 13 we did in class. 14. The graph of the piecewise linear function f is shown in the figure. G is equal to the integral from -2 to x of f of t. Which of the following is the greatest? So it's looking for an absolute maximum. Again, absolute extrema can only occur at the endpoints and the critical points. So my endpoint would be -3. So there's -3. Other endpoint is 2, which is here. And then my critical point is 1. Right here. Please don't do that. Oh, boy. Let's get back to where it was. All right, notice the -2 is not an endpoint or a critical point, so that's why I crossed it out. That automatically goes. And 0 is also not an endpoint or a critical point, so those two I can automatically throw out. Then it's just a matter of which one's the greatest. We're starting off at -2. If I start off at -2, since this is a positive area, that means 1 is going to be bigger than I was at -2. And then since I decrease some between 1 and 2, that means 1 has to be bigger than 2. So 2 cannot be the answer, so it's either got to be 1 or 3. And since I'm starting at -2 and then I go backwards, that means this area is actually going to end up being negative, and I go backwards. So that means my biggest answer is going to come from 1. Now, you can take the time and figure up all that area and then compare them, but it's much quicker just to compare the areas to figure out which one's bigger and which one's smaller, because we got to the answer real quick there instead of doing actual finding the area. All right, we did 15, we did 16, 17 we did not do. Water is pumped into a tank at a rate, gallons per minute, where T is the number of minutes since the pump was turned on. If the tank contained 800 of water when the pump was turned on, how much water to the nearest gallon is in the tank after 20 minutes? So I want to find gallons. If I have gallons per minute and I want gallons, that means I need to integrate. So I need to integrate R of T from 0 to 20. Don't forget about the 800. Notice it says calculator. So put all this in your calculator. That spits out 1,220.142 gallons. We did 18 in class. We did 19 in class. 20 we did not do. We want to find f of 4, and they gave me f of 1 is -1. So we're going to start with -1. The 1 has to be on bottom because that goes with the -1. 4 goes on top because that's what I'm wanting to find. And then I integrate inside. So I change the square root of x to an x to the -1/2 and then integrate. We end up with this. Make sure you plug the top in first, then plug in the bottom, and then clean it up. We get -8. Nothing real fancy about that problem. This one is very similar to the last problem. We want to find g of 4. They give me g of 2 equals -7. So that means we need to start with -7, and then we need to go from 2 to 4. So we start with -7, and then we go from 2 to 4, integrate f. There's my answer. Pretty straightforward. All right, we did 22 together in class. We did 23 in class. We did 24 in class. We did not do 25, which is kind of surprising. I'm surprised you guys didn't ask about that. So we have f of 6 equals 3. That's our starting point. We want to label at least 4 points and then sketch the graph. So f of 6 is right here. So that means I can find 7, 8, 9. I can find f of 9, which is right there. I can find f of 2, which is right there. And I can find f of -1, which is right there. So if I'm starting off with 6, and then I go to the right, 6 or 3, 3 plus 1 gives me 4, so that means f of 9 is going to be 4. Then we go from here to there. Since we're going backwards, we need to change the sign. Normally, it would be a -3 since it's on the bottom, but since I'm going backwards, that's a +3. So I need 3 plus 3 gives me the 6. And then I go backwards here. Normally, this would be a +4, but since we're going backwards, that means this is a -4. So I was at 6 here, and then 6 minus 4 gives me 2. So I have -1. I don't know. This right here is in the wrong spot. It should be right there. I was thrown off because of that right there. So this dot, make sure you move that dot over to here. So f of -1 is 2. Then we have f of 2 is 6. So here's 2. There's 6. F of 6 is 3. So here's 6. There's 3. And f of 9 is 4. So here's 9. And there's 4. Then the next thing we want is our POIs. POIs occur at the maximums and minimums. So there's 1, 2, and 3. So I have a POI right here. So I bring it down in between those two dots. There it is. I bring it down in between my two dots. There's a POI. Bring it down. There's a POI. My derivative is increasing here, so that means we're concave up. Then we are decreasing, so we're concave down. We're still decreasing, so we're still concave down. We're increasing, so we're concave up. Still increasing, so I'm still concave up. And then we are decreasing to finish off, so we are concave down. Make sure when you draw this on the test that I can tell what's concave up and what's concave down. Make sure you give me dots for your points of inflection. It makes it a lot easier for me to grade, and it's a lot easier for me to tell you know what you're doing. All right, we did 26 in class as well. So that covers everything for review for test 6. Hope you looked over this video, and make sure you check your reviews, look over your quizzes, and I'm expecting good grades on this as I grade it tomorrow.